Thank you. Hi, thanks for sticking it out today. Just before I start, I want to let everybody know, I don't know if you've noticed, it's just a little warm in the room. And that may become apparent to you at some point. So if you need to stand up, stretch, get a drink of water, breathe in the air conditioning room at any time, please do. I will not be offended. Hi, my name is Darin, and I'm actually relatively new to RubyMotion, and I think I'm a little bit of a unicorn in the RubyMotion world because I've only written Android apps. So thank you very much. Thank you. I think I got a set of steak knives or something like that. So if you've been listening to the last couple talks, you've probably seen a lot of really cool stuff for RedPotion, and since BluePotion exists, you're probably asking yourself, does that mean that all this cool stuff is available on Android? Well, I'm here to tell you that the answer to that question is a resounding not so much. But we are working on it. We are working on it, and we are getting there. We're calling ourselves in alpha right now. The stuff that's in there works well, but it's not totally complete. But hopefully we'll give you a taste of what's available right now. First of all, I want to talk about the evolution a little bit. So as Todd mentioned, RedPotion grew very organically. The community started working on gems that sat on top of the RubyMotion runtime to make interesting things. We had things like RMQ, it grew and became awesome. We had promotion, it grew and became awesome. CDQ became awesome. Then all these other gems came together. They too were awesome, and someone said, hey, let's put these all together and make something that is just amazingly awesome. And so this happened, and we had this great thing called RedPotion. Then Android came along. We said, well, what are we going to do? We don't have promotion. We don't have RMQ. We don't have AF motion. So we're looking at it a little bit backwards. With BluePotion, we're kind of looking at the total RedPotion experience and working backwards. So if you look at the BluePotion GitHub repo right now, you'll see actual folders for promotion, RMQ, and these other things that we've put together. They're all bundled up together right now, and they're going to build up. If you're a hardcore promotion user right now, you'll look at promotion on Android and say, oh, it's missing this, that, and the other thing. Same thing for RMQ. We're getting there. One day, these might end up splitting up into separate gems so that we can have the a la carte experience that we're enjoying on iOS right now. But for now, it's kind of a one bundle altogether. So how does it compare to RMQ? Todd talked to, sorry, RedPotion. I'm doing the same thing. Todd touched on this a little bit earlier. This is the rallying cry for anything that claims to be cross-platform. Write once, run everywhere. And if you've hit this a number of times in your career, as I have, you begin to think that it's the kind of thing that this guy would say. Write once, run everywhere is never really quite like that. It's write once, test everywhere. And usually something works great on one side, doesn't quite work so well on the other side, or one side has an amazing feature that the other side doesn't have, and you're in a walled garden. There's only so much that's available to you, because when you do write once, run everywhere, you have to do the lowest common denominator. Only thing that will work on both. So we are eschewing this approach for learn once, write everywhere. As much as possible, we want to keep the APIs the same, but the cold, hard fact of the matter is, right now, iOS and Android are very, very different platforms, and they do different things better. They have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have some things on one side that's super cool that's not available on the other side, and we don't want to take that away. The reason we come to something like RubyMotion over PhoneGap or anything like that is we want to give our users the native experience, native performance, native features, and there's no reason we should have to take that away. However, we do want to make it easier. So if you think on one side, you have just purely writing native code, Java and Swift on one side, and on the other side, something like PhoneGap, which is write once, run everywhere. We're kind of trying to go up the middle. Can we do something that gives you, doesn't take away anything that you could do on native, but still makes it easier? So given all that, why would you bother to use Red or BluePotion? For one thing, you'll get a common architectural framework. So you will have two code bases, at least right now. But if you look at your iOS code base and you look at your Android code base, they're going to have the same folders. They're going to have the same high-level classes. And that's going to make it easier for you to jump back and forth, reason about what's going on, and here's the critical thing, find places where you can write classes that can be shared across both. And this is already happening for us in our iOS and Android apps. Second is that we're going to do our best to provide you with best practices. We're doing a lot of stuff under the hood on your behalf. Again, you can jump in and get down and dirty and make things happen, but we're trying to skip some steps for you. But as we're doing that, we're trying to make sure that we're being consistent with what Apple recommends, what Google recommends in terms of best practices. So we're hoping and striving to lead you in the right direction, and if we're not, you should certainly let us know. And finally, we're going to save you a lot of typing, and this is especially true on Android, the API for which is, how shall we say, a little verbose. So let me just do, this is going to be kind of a whirlwind tour through some of the main features in BluePotion. And let's start with the promotion side of things. So here's some working Android code. If you've watched the last two talks, this is going to look very familiar. We've got a home screen that inherits from promotion screen. We're setting a title. We have an onload method. Now, how many people have done any Android development? Just curious. Okay, a few folks. So one of the first questions to come across is, all right, on iOS, we know that a screen is a UI view controller. What is it on the Android side? Unfortunately, there's not an easy analog. There's two possible choices. There are activities, which go back to Android 1, and there are fragments, which are a little newer, as of Android 3. They're similar in that they both have life cycles, but activities are a little more heavyweight. Fragments are composable and can live inside activities. If you're confused, you should be. I'm still sorting this out, but I think I finally got a handle on it. So suffice it to say, you have a couple of options. So after a lot of debate and wringing of hands and weeping of gnashing of teeth, we settled on screens are fragments. One of the amazing reasons we did this is it was Google's very strong recommendation that this is the way forward. And there's a great series of articles about Android development, and this was kind of the thing that put it together for me. You should implement an activity when you want to allow others to launch specific parts of your app. This is something kind of unique to Android, such as for executing a share operation or opening some content contained in the app. So consider a Twitter application. You've got a timeline view, and you click over into a compose view when you want to write a tweet. Now let's say you're in your browser and you want to tweet out the URL that you're looking at. You might want to click a button and send that to your Twitter app. This is pretty common in Android, so it would send you to the Twitter app and send you straight into the compose window. That's something you want to expose at the activity level. But for most apps, probably you just need one activity and you just want to swap fragments in and out as you switch from screen to screen. So that's the default mode of BluePotion. But again, you can skip over it if you want. So to open a screen, looks pretty much the same as in iOS. Right now, you pass in the name of the class or the actual class that you want to open. We're going to support the instance syntax that's available in iOS, but it's not there yet. And what we do is, since this is a fragment, there must be an activity. We create an activity on your behalf. It's behind the scenes. You have access to it. You can mess around with it if you want to. Most of the time, you don't need to. If you need some really custom behavior and you need the activity to do something very specific, you can pass in your own activity as well. So again, this is a case where we're trying to make it easier for you to do the most common case, but if you want to do an uncommon case, we don't want to take that away either. So when you do this and you just open a screen, by default, what you'll get at the activity level is something that maps pretty closely to a UI navigation controller, which means it's something that's got an action bar at the top, and as you open screen after screen after screen, it's keeping track on what Android calls the back stack. Android has a physical back button on it that generally works as you're switching from app to app, and you can actually go back. So what we do behind the scenes is integrate something like the navigation controller. So as you continue to open screens, the user can hit the back button and go back through those screens. That'll just happen automatically. If you need to pass an argument in, like let's say you're in your Twitter app and you click somewhere on the timeline to see the details of the tweet, maybe you want to pass in the ID, just a symbol, and then the name. And then in your screen class, you just define a setter, and that value will be passed in. if any of you folks that have done Android have ever had to deal with fragment arguments, you can perhaps appreciate the amount of work that's going on behind the scenes to make this happen. It's a lot harder than it should be, but that's what our friends at Google like to do. Actually, Todd died for that one. Lifecycle events. So we've got an on load, just like in iOS. In Android, this maps directly to the on activity created event. Yes, Jamin. Do you really want me to? Yeah. Yes, so there is a difference in syntax right now. There's an issue with RubyMotion. There's a ticket filed that is making it hard to do subclasses from modularized classes. So right now it's constrained altogether, and it sort of looks a little bit like our good friend Objective-C. But there it is, and it works fine. So this is the on activity created, and you also get, again, if you're familiar with Android, you sort of know these: on start, on resume, on pause. They've been rubified in that we're using snake case. You don't need to call super, which normally you do if you're just inheriting the Android methods. But again, remember that PM screen is just a subclass of fragment. So if you want to override the real ON capital S start method, you can. And anything you can do with a fragment, you can do in this class. Coming soon, we saw a great demo of the table screen in iOS. And Android will have the PM list screen, which will work exactly the same way, or pretty close. Just a nice array of hashes, and everything will work. That's pretty close to done, yeah? That's the right answer, by the way. He did not commit to a date. That's awesome. So let's look at RMQ. So the basics work. Again, you've probably seen this last couple talks. This line right here, this is assuming we're in the context of a screen. We call append to put in a text view. Now the reason it says potion : text view is because Java is a namespace language. And oh my God, do they love their namespaces. Because they can put things into packages, it's great to separate things out. But Java has an import statement which makes it really easy to scoop in everything in a certain package without having to specify the full path. So Java developers tend to go crazy with the namespaces. But in Ruby land, we don't have that. So we always have to use the full path. So I got tired of typing Android : widget : text view, and then Android : widget : button. And so we created this potion namespace where we're dropping in the most common things. So most of the UI widgets that you use, some of the common classes like graphics and color, you just do potion name, name, and you get the right thing. The symbol text view at the end is a style. We talked about that, and I'll show that again. The data works exactly the same way. It will set the most common data element. For text view, it's the text. And here's an event handler: on, tap, do, and then open another screen.
Is potion text view in that example, is that just a strict subclass of?
No, it's just an alias. Yeah. So style sheets work exactly the same way. You specify your style sheet class right up there in your screen. And then you create a style sheet class and set up your methods that match the styles, and you set your styles. Now, you may be looking at this and saying, hey, this doesn't look like iOS. And the answer is no. These are straight up Android styles. If you were doing your Android layout in XML, which is pretty common, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, any of the styles that you would set in there, you can set here, but they've been snake cased. So it feels a little more Ruby-like. And also because these are wrappers, we're trying to make that clear. We've got some symbol shortcuts for wrap content and match parent, which are common conventions in Android. And the text sizes and paddings you can set here. Generally in an XML file, boy, do I even want to get into this. Point sizes in Android are weird. Let me just say that. Generally, for most things, you want to set what are called DIPs, device independent pixels. This is because Android devices vary widely in terms of screen size and pixel density. But some cases you don't want to use device-independent pixels. You want to use scaled pixels, for example, for fonts. Why are there two different specifications? Well, if you have an opportunity to make things more confusing and upset developers, why wouldn't you do it? But some conventions are emerging. Generally, they say for anything that's layout related, like margins, paddings, you want to use dips. For anything that's font sizes, you want to use SPs, scale pixels. So by default, we just do that. We need to make it so you can override that if you need to, but that doesn't work yet. But generally, set the numbers that you want to, and it will do the right thing. Selecting, this is some nice RMQ stuff. You can call find, which is an alias for RMQ, for those of you who know that. Pass in the class name, pass in an ID, pass in a style. It will do what you expect. You can then start working with the things that it returns. In the first example, we're going to look for every single instance of text view in the current screen and hide it. We're going to find the specific ID and we're going to disable it. We're going to find whatever widget sits in there that has this style and apply a different style. And the great thing about the way RMQ works is this is the jQuery-like behavior. If there are no text views on the screen, it won't crash. It'll just ignore it. If you have 10 of them, it will hide all of them. If it finds one of them, it will hide it. So you don't ever have to do this null checking or anything like that. Some nice methods for traversing. Those are pretty self-explanatory. XML support. Now, if you start going through Android tutorials or reading the documentation, they're going to start with, here's how you do your layout in XML. And even if you go on Stack Overflow and someone says, how would you make this kind of view? Someone says, well, you'd start with this XML. Now, Ruby developers typically hate XML with a passion that's generally reserved for much harsher things. So that's why we built in all the stuff that I just showed you with RMQ, style sheets and appending and all that, so you can do it in code. Now, I'm with Rich. I hate visual builders too. Anything that has a graphical layout and you drag and drop things and it generates code for you in the background uniformly sucks. But for every rule, there's an exception. As it turns out, the layout tool in Android Studio does not suck. It actually works pretty well. It does the right thing, and the code it generates behind the scenes, which is just a straight XML file you would write yourself, is readable, tweakable, and sane. And given that the life cycle of reloading things until we have live reloading on Android can be a little slow, the layout tool is actually pretty nice. So we've been going back and forth a little bit in our own work. Sometimes we write things in code, and sometimes we do things with XML. So we made it easier for ourselves. So if you use an XML layout, you can just use this directive at the top. And what this is going to do is look in your resources /layout/ and find a home screen.xml. It's going to inflate it, set it as the main view. And then anywhere throughout your screen, if you want to get one of the widgets in there, just call find and pass in the ID that was set in the XML, and it will work. If you do this in Java or just straight RubyMotion, there's quite a bit of boilerplate to make this happen. And we've just pushed the boilerplate behind the scenes. Oh, there's my highlights. I didn't have to do that. The application object. There's a method you can call anywhere within the code base called app, which gives you some nice convenient methods. There's your identifier, and you can query what kind of environment you're in. And there's a few other objects associated to that. If you haven't dealt with Android, this will seem very odd, but resource IDs are a big thing. Generally, you have to spell them out this way. This would refer to a screen layout that you've defined. App.r gives you a little more Ruby-like syntax. I'll let you bask in that for a moment.
Should that be a symbol?
Yes, that should be. Okay. Thank you. I didn't. A Jamin edited him is what happened. Yeah. Yeah, anything that's defined in your XML files. App.net. This was actually exclusive to Android until pretty recently. We put it into BluePotion, and then it found its way back to RedPotion. But this is the same syntax we saw before, where you can just call app.net, get JSON, get a response block back, and execute whatever you like. We also have a nice shortcut around toast, which are the little pills that show up with text at the bottom of the screen. Those are about 3 change method calls normally to do, or you can just do app toast. App async, this actually lives at its own gem called motion async, but we wrapped it in here. This is for executing code off the main UI thread. And if you just need to run something in the background, it's as simple as this. It's a wrapper around Android's async task class. If you need to do something with the data that's returned by this, you just add an on-completion handler. And this data that's passed in is whatever the return value of this async block up here was. So assuming this went and fetched some data from a server, you get it here, and then you pass it into whatever you want. Thank you. The device object gives you all kinds of nice information about what you're looking at. Checking the SDK version ends up being pretty important depending on what APIs you're using. You might have something that is not supported on older devices, so you'll want to handle it differently. And there's much, much more and more to come. So again, we're at alpha, but some basics are working. At Infinite Red, we have 1 Android app that's going into beta testing next week, and another 1 or 2 in active development right now. So we're seriously dogfooding this, and we're using this in all of our own client work. So the stuff that's up there, we try to make sure is stable. There's still plenty of work to do, so come join us. And that's all I have. Thank you. Do you want to do questions next door again, or? Okay. Until people pass out. We'll do that. Oh, yeah, any questions? Yeah. It's wrapping Volley. But we're actually talking about switching it out to a third-party library called Ion, which has some nicer features and has actually been updated within the last 2 years, unlike Volley. In some ways, that's interesting. The nice thing for you as a Red BluePotion developer is you don't need to care, because we'll make sure the API is stable, even if we change that out. Yes, the gentleman in the side.
So about XML files.
Yeah.
How do you actually do that? I mean, what's the process? You start Android Studio.
Mm-hmm.
Can you actually generate XML files? Only that? Do you have to create like a fake project?
Yeah, you end up creating a fake project. We haven't quite found out what the best workflow is. I think I tend to create a project that's totally outside of the current project and move the files over. Yeah, so I just generate the files there, and then when it feels like it's done, I just copy it over to my directory.
And it just works? I mean, the XML file don't contain the name of the project? Or
No.
they are completely independent?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, they just go right over.
One of the features we talked about adding to BluePotion, you would just say Potion edit this XML. It would create a project for you, launch Studio, let you edit, save it, and it'd bring it back.
Yeah, that's a great thing.
Once David starts working on it.
Right. He's checking the temperature in hell right now to see if that'll ever happen. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, if you think of anything else, I'm at Darin Wilson on Twitter. I'm also active on the community forum. Ask questions there. I'll probably. What's that? Because I hang out with you guys. Yeah. See what I did there? But yeah, feel free to hit us up with questions anytime, and thanks a lot.